Okay. Now we're going to look at some miscellaneous components today. Label. We looked at the text box, the button. So we'll be expanding upon those. List box, combo box also. So we'll be expanding upon those, looking at other items. Okay. First thing I'm going to take a look at is something called a checkbox. It's right here. So I'm going to double click that, put it on there, and double click another checkbox. And a button. And let's see, I'm going to put a text box on there also. And I'll put a label on there. Maybe another label. Okay. So over here, I'm going to change the font. 14. Make them a little bit bigger so we can see them. And actually, I guess I need another label for this. So I'll copy this and paste it. Okay, so we're going to have a couple of check boxes here that allow us to select options, basically. So here I'm going to change this to amount. And this particular checkbox, I'll say add tax. This one I'll say add shipping. And this, say final amount. And this one I'll just put a 0 in. And then the button, I'll have it say calculate. Okay, so the user's going to put the amount in here. And if they need to add tax, they'll click this button. If they need to add shipping, they'll click this button. And then when they click calculate, it'll click their or figure out their final amount. Now, just to simplify this a little bit, for the add tax, we're going to be adding 7% on. Shipping is going to be a standard, say $20. Now I'm going to be referring to some of these blanks, some of these text boxes, where they input the value, and these check boxes, and then this label. So I need to name them. So I come up here and I call this one TB_amount. This I'm going to refer to as check box in tax. And this one I'll refer to checkbox shipping. And then this one will be LB_final amount. Okay, so I'm going to keep those in mind. I'll double click the calculate. There we go. Now I'm going to declare this as a double. This is going to be my amount. I'm going to need a final amount. Now amount we're going to bring in from that text box. So amount is going to equal to tb underscore amount dot text. Now this is going to come in as a string. So that comes in as a string, and this is a double. Remember before we did .int and then the parse. Well, now here we're going to use double. I think it's uppercase. Parse. Same principle. It'll take what's in the text box and it'll convert it to a double and then assign it to amount. Now for our checkboxes. You don't actually have to put those into a separate variable if you don't want to. I'm going to go ahead and set final amount is equal to amount to begin with. So I'm going to do a check here. If checkbox dot tax or tax dot, and you see there's a checked option. This is Boolean. It's true or false. So I could simply just say that right there. I could do equals true if I needed to, but that's going to check to see if that is checked. Okay, so if that's checked, I want to add 7% onto my final amount. So I have my final amount is equal to the final amount plus the final amount times 7%. Then I'm going to check if the checkbox shipping is checked. Then final amount is going to equal to final amount plus $20. What doesn't like about that? Must not have been what I called that. Oh, checked. Helps to actually use a property. There we go. Okay, so we've calculated our final amount. Now we need to write it out back out to that label. So label final amount dot text. Now text is a string, and final amount is a double. So remember we have to do the dot to string. That's the same principle as what we did with the integers when we wrote them back out. So if I run this, let me grab a drink. And I apologize for coughing. I'm still under the weather. Okay, so if I put 100 in there, if I click on calculate, it says 100. Now if I add a tax on, add 7%, if I click that, it gives me 107. If I click the add shipping, then that should give me 127, which it does. And I can uncheck the add tax, and that should give us 120, which it does. So that's how the checkbox right here works. Is there any questions on that? No? Okay. Some of these will be seen later on in the semester. The date time picker isn't too exciting by itself. Does a fantastic feature for your programs, but if I add that on there, And change the font. If I run that, if I choose the drop down, it pops up with the calendar, so I can pick whichever one I want, which is actually a fantastic, like I say, a fantastic feature, but it's not too exciting for showing on the screen. Now through code, then we'll be accessing the properties of this, and that'll give us different aspects of the date. But we haven't talked about even the date type yet, so we won't get there. We'll get there eventually. Okay. Label, link label, list box, list view. Okay. Month calendar. Progress. Radio button. Let's look at radio button. And going to delete that. I want to highlight these and delete those. Now move these down. Okay, so let me drop on some radio buttons. These are another way of choosing options. Yeah, change the font on all those to 14. Okay, and this first one, I'm going to change the text on it. To add 3%. This one I'll change to add 5%. And this one I'll change to add 7%. Okay, so if I run that, oops. No, don't want to run that. Let me go change the code a little bit. Now if I run it. Now what the checkbox allowed us to do is it allowed us to select multiple ones. Here, if I select the 3%, it's checked. Now if I select the 5%, it unchecks the 3% and checks this one. If I click that, then it checks that and unchecks these. So these are radio buttons. With radio buttons, it only allows one selection. So when you're designing a program, you have to think about whether a checkbox makes more sense. Like in the example I gave you, you could pay tax and pay shipping. So it makes sense to have both of them as such you can select it. Now here, if this is our tax rate, it doesn't make sense for you to choose two of them. You're either going to pay 3% sales tax, 5%, 7%. Okay, so that's what a radio button is. Now we're going to refer to these in code, so I need to give them names. So I'll click this first one, and I'll call it RB, I guess, for radio button, underscore 3%. And this one, I'll call it RB underscore 5%. And this one I'll call RB underscore 7%. Now to begin with, maybe we want one of these selected, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so let me go to my calculate button now. It's very similar to the other one. You have all this the same. You bring in your amount, you start figuring your final amount, and then we do checks. If RB underscore 3% dot checked, then your final amount is going to equal to your final amount plus a final amount times 3%. If RB underscore 5% dot checked, then our final amount is going to equal to the final amount plus final amount times 0.05. And our last one, if RB underscore 7% dot checked, final amount is equal to final amount plus final amount times 7%. And then we're still going to write out the final amount back out to that label. Okay, so if I run this now, if I put 1,000 here, and I click add 3% and click calculate, we get 1,030. Yeah, that's right. Okay. If I put 5%, 1,050, 7%, 1,070. Now, let me click start. Click calculate. Blows up. Input string was not in the correct format. And you know, I think I saw out of it yesterday. I don't think I showed the debug mode in 3D game development. I apologize for that for those who are in that class. It just struck me because I showed debugging here, but I didn't show it in that class. Okay, now I got the button chose here. You see there's an enabled property. It says true. Let's set that to false and run it. Okay, now it does not let me click calculate. So what I want code-wise, now I'll get to these here in a little bit. Code-wise is I want to type in a value here. And once this gets a value in here, I want to be able to click the button. Now sometimes this is kind of tricky to get it to work, depending upon what you're trying to achieve. On your button here, you see drag, drop, font change, key press. You have to figure out what makes sense for, that's weird. You have to figure out what makes sense for what you're wanting to work with. The one I actually want is text changed. That's why I thought it was strange that it sensed what I was wanting to do. But then again, I guess that's really the only thing that's a main thing you would do with a text box. Check to see if it's changed. Okay, so that's where I want to put my code at. So double click that, and you see it now says text changed. Well, I'm going to declare a string, and I'll call it S amount. And I'm going to say S amount is equal to TB underscore amount dot text. Now I'm bringing S amount into my code as a string. So I'm going to have to work with it as a string. And it's coming again from the text box. So now if I do a check, S amount, and seemed like I used equals the other day and it worked. But let me try it again. If it's not equal to empty string, which means something's been input, then I want to change my button. Now, since I'm going to refer to my button within code, maybe I ought to give it a name now. So if I come over here, and let's see, there's my properties. I'll call it button calculate. So then button calculate dot enabled equals true. So let's run that and see what it does. If I put 3 in there, all of a sudden now I can click the button. If I do a backspace, well, I'd want that disabled. So here you do an else and disable it. This is a way you can do error checking without having to put extra code in there. Now we got a little bit of an issue here. If I do 3, I can click it now. If I do a backspace, I don't have to. If I do a space bar, it puts a space there and allows me to click calculate, which if I do, it'll blow up. So the issue that I was referring to is we need to do something called trimming to get rid of any spaces. This I may have to play with a little bit if I remember how to do it. Trim. This returns a string. Okay. So S amount is going to equal to S amount dot trim. Now trim will remove spaces at the beginning and the ending. Like that. So let's run that now. Put 3 in and click calculate. Backspace does that. I do a space. Still doesn't allow me to do that. If I put a 3 in now, though, it'll allow me to. Now it doesn't mind that there's a space here at the beginning, but it might affect this. Let's click calculate and see. No, it didn't affect that at all. So that was fine. So now we got this set up such that I can't click this button unless I enter in something in the blank. Well, if I put 3 in here, maybe I want to force them to choose one of these options. Easiest way is you choose one of these and you go to the checked property that says false, and you double click that, and then it changes it to true. Now, no matter what, one of them will be checked. So if I come in here, if I put an amount in here, there is no way that I can uncheck all of them. One of them has to be checked. And typically, when you're talking about radio buttons, it's by default you have to choose one of them. That's kind of the standard on that. Okay, and then click calculate and so forth. Now there's one other option I want to add to this. I'm going to add radio buttons for shipping. Like add $20 shipping, add $30 shipping. So I'm going to double click the radio button again and again. I'll move them over here. And one of these is going to be for add $20 shipping. One of them will be for add $30 shipping. If I run that, I get this, and I put a value in there. I can click these just like before. That hasn't changed. Now if I click over here, though, it unchecks that. But actually, this is good. This is my tax, and this is going to be my shipping. So it actually grouped all of these together, which I don't want. Okay, so let me come over here. I'm going to highlight those. I used my rectangular select. I clicked in the gray area and dragged and drew a rectangle around those. Now press delete. We have something called a container. And a container allows us to put the controls into maybe an invisible box, into some kind of container of some sort. The panel is one I'm going to look at first. So I'll double click panel. It's nothing too exciting. If I ran this, I don't think you'd even see it. Let me see if that's a true statement. Yeah, you don't even see it. It's an invisible grouping. Now, if I want to add my radio buttons, if I have this selected, and I come over to my radio button, and then drag it onto there, this is now part of the panel. If I drop another radio button, that's part of the panel. And if you move the panel, it actually moves those components also. So it's going to serve two purposes that we're looking at now. It's going to create a logical grouping, and it'll also allow you to rearrange your screen easily. So if you have 10 radio buttons, you have them all in a panel, you can just move the panel if you want to move those radio buttons a different part of your screen. Okay, so now if I run this just to show it before I start changing properties. Okay, got these selected. If I click over here, notice it does not change what I got selected over here. So these are in two separate groups now. So let's come over here and I'm going to change those both to 14. This first one, I'm going to make it checked, so it's checked. And then I'm going to change the text of it to say add $20. That's for our shipping. I have to give it an appropriate name. RB add 20. This one, I'll give it another name. I'll give it RB add 40. Let's say $40. And I want to change the text on it. Just say add $40. And I could within this logical grouping, this panel, I could add a label. And let me change that to 14. And I'll change the text to shipping. And let me put my coat on real quick. Chilled. I don't know if it's getting colder in here, or probably is the weather outside. What's the illness? Oh, okay. So I got that in there now. Now I want to check that in my calculate, if which one of these is selected. So I'll come down here. And if I'm say if RB underscore add 20 dot checked, then final amount is going to equal to final amount plus $20. If RB underscore add 40 is checked, final amount is going to equal to final amount plus 40. So this part up here is calculating tax. And this part down here is calculating shipping. So if I ran that now, again, I can't click calculate until I put an amount in here. If I click calculate, 3%, that's $30 onto that, plus another 20 is 50. So that's 1,050. This should be 1,070. Yeah. If I had 7%, that's $70 added onto here. 70 plus 40 is 110, so it should be
1,110.
Yeah, 1,110. And so it's working. Now, you can have a mixture of these. You could have a, let me move this down a little bit. You could have check boxes also. So, like for insurance. So let me change the font on that. And I'm looking right at the text. Add insurance. You know, put just a static amount there, $10. Okay, so now I need to give this a name so I can access it through my programming. So under the name up here, I'll call this checkbox underscore insurance. And again, I go back to my calculate. Nope. Oh, there it is. So this is calculating insurance. And I'll say if checkbox insurance dot checked. Oh. And final amount is going to equal to final amount plus no memory. What am I doing there? No. $10. Okay. So let's run this. Yeah, put 1,000 in that. At 5%, I didn't label that, but that's tax and shipping, $40. I'll add insurance. That's 50 plus another 50, 100, 1,100. Yeah. Take that off. Should be $10 less, which it is. So that's how you can do a mixture of those. Is there any questions on the functionality of the checkboxes and radio buttons? By the way, there is no this capability here with the checkboxes and the radio buttons, that's pretty much in every package that has those. They work the same way. You just check to see if it's checked. The beauty of that is it makes your program less prone to breaking. Like if I had a text box for each one of these items, and they could put in the amount, well, then I could possibly have them put it in incorrectly and give me an error. Now, in some cases, some Windows applications you'll see like add X%. Like this one right here. Put something like that. And then there'll be a text box to the side. And let me go ahead and change the font of that. 14. What this allows you to do is if your tax rate changes, you're in a different part of the country, and you need to put in 13.1%. Well, this allows you to put 13.1 in this blank after you've chose this this option. So I need to access this through programming. So up here, the name, I'm going to call that TB underscore %. And I need to change calculate. No longer am I hard coding 7%, so it probably makes sense to actually rename this. Instead of 7%, maybe X%. So let me come over here and choose this one. The name, I'll give it as RB underscore X%. Okay, so if our RB underscore X% is checked, I'm going to have my braces here because I'm going to have more than one line of code. If you got an if statement, you can get by with an if statement with one line of code. You can get by without the braces. If you got 2 or more lines of code, you have to put braces around it. Well, I need to retrieve the %. So up here, I need to declare %. And down here then, I want to retrieve that. So I'll say % is equal to double dot parse TB underscore % dot text. That will retrieve it from that text box, convert it to a double, and assign it to %. So then down here, I want to put my variable % in there. Now let's run this. It's got one other issue we need to correct after we run it, and just look at that a little bit. Okay, so I put in 100 here. I come down here and put 20%. 2 issues actually. If I click calculate, you see we had our, I was wondering why it was 140. We had our $20 shipping that's no matter what. This gave us $20 onto that $100. So that's where the 140 came from. Problem is, it says add X%. So most people wouldn't put in 0.20. They'd put in 20. That's one issue. Another issue is if I have one of these other ones selected, I shouldn't even be able to put anything in here, because that'll create confusion for some users. Okay, so first, it's easy up here where you bring in %. If it's coming in as like 20, then I just simply divide by 100. Dividing by 100 changes it to decimal form. So that's now handled. The other is if this is checked, then I want to enable this. So, well, to begin with, I have to disable it. So I'm going to click that, and I go to my enabled. I'll set that equal to false. Now again, what that does is, you see right here, I cannot click in this blank. Now, once I click in here, I want to be able to click in this blank. So, if you think about, well, how would I program that? Well, that means this is changing. So let's go see if we can spot that. And I wish it wouldn't highlight the one we want, so we could browse through here and think about it and so forth. But it says check changed. Well, that kind of sounds like what we're wanting to check. So I'm going to double click that. And I'm going to say if rb_x% dot checked. If it's checked, then I want to enable that text box. So tb_% dot enabled equals true. If it's not checked, then I want to disable it. So I'll say tb_% dot enabled is equal to false. Okay, I think that should do it. So let's go try that. Okay, so I can't click in here because it doesn't make any sense for me clicking there. So let me put 1,000 in here. I click this, it now enables this. So I can put 20 in there. And I click calculate, 20%. Yeah, I guess that'd be right. 200 there, 20 there, 1,000 there. Okay. It's probably best when you do this to choose smaller numbers you can easily think of. But what do you want to do if you click up here? Obviously, we want this disabled, but do you want to blank it out? This is what you have to decide from a design standpoint. I don't think there is any hard and fast rule. Some people like to leave it there because then if the person clicks it, they don't have to re-enter the amount here. Some people like to just blank it out so there's no confusion, so people aren't thinking it's 20%. To blank it out is easy. Let's see, which one is it? Here's where we're disabling it. So I'm under this else, I'm gonna put a beginning curly bracket, and then I'll put a closing curly bracket. And I'm gonna say, I might have to do this before I disable it, but I don't know. tb% dot clear. We'll try that. You notice that I had to put the beginning parentheses and closing parentheses on there. Saw the red squiggly. The clear is a method. That's why you have to have the beginning parentheses and closing parentheses. Okay, so put 1,000 in here. Click that. I put 20 in there. Okay, that's still working. Now if I click up here, it disables this and clears it out. So there's nothing in a blank. So that's how you can use some of your enabling, use your check boxes and your radio buttons to create your code so it's more reliable. Doesn't break on a user as much. Now this will still break. I can break it. I can put B in here and click calculate. We haven't covered exception handling yet, but that would be the last part that we'd need to put in here, is to make sure that we're not creating a system.format exception. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stop that. Shipping. Shipping was a label. I'm going to delete that. Before, we just had this, a panel, that we didn't know what these numbers represented. there is another container called a group box. And I double click this group box. Oops. And I got these. Now I'm going to come up here and I'm going to highlight those two and I'm going to cut them. You can also simply move them. Come down here and I'll paste them. Then I'm going to go ahead and delete this panel. So let's run this. Our panel was invisible. It was kind of an invisible container. Notice when I run this, it actually has a title on it. It says Group Box 1. This is kind of, you can think of this as a panel with a title. So here, if I have the group box selected, I come over here and you see there's a text that says Group Box 1. And here I could put in, what was it, shipping? So you give it a title up there. Our font, I could change to 40 or 14. Make it bigger. So that's the difference between those. They're not too exciting. You know, it saves, perform same purpose. These are now logically grouped together. If I want to move this, it moves everything instead of just one item. Okay, let's just run this, make sure it works. Okay, so click the 5% there, click add 40, and 1090? Yeah, 1090. So if I do this one, it should be 1100, and everything's still working. By the way, this is what you do in a lot of programming jobs. I'm sitting as a computer programmer and I'm designing a screen for somebody in shipping. And maybe they're putting the amount in and I'm calculating all this. Now, usually there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of the main idea of what you do as a programmer. When I say there's a lot more to it than that, maybe what they're inputting in up here is a customer number. You go look the customer number up in the database and you see where they live at. Then, based upon the state or county or whatever code you use to look it up, you go look up the tax rate for that area. And then you don't ask them what the tax rate is. You put it into the program for them. So somebody who used to do it by hand, where they'd get a shipment, they'd have to maybe look it up on their phone and so forth and see what the tax rate is. This does it automatically for them. Shipping, this is oftentimes connected via some kind of machine. So they don't actually say $20 or $40 like that. Depends on how large your company is. At IFR, we had, I think, 2 shippers, UPS and FedEx, I believe, that provided their own machines with scales. And so when they needed to ship something via UPS or FedEx, they would put the product on the scales. It would, it did everything. It printed off the label, the shipping label, based upon all the codes and everything. It figured the amount. It even sent that amount over to our database so we could update. And then it sent that amount also into their main office. So, and I'm not sure how it did all that. You know, they didn't let us know. But then they would send us the amount that we needed to pay for shipping each month, or maybe they took it out of our account directly. So it's not as backwards as you think when you're dealing with a corporation. They have the equipment there that interfaces directly with UPS's database, with FedEx's, and figures it all automatic. Now, after you input all this in and you click calculate, this calculate might actually be ship, in which case it would take all that information, store it into a different database, different table perhaps, and then send it on its way. But anyway, the design of the screen is kind of what we're doing here, and that's the same principle as what you do over with a database system. Is there any questions on any of that? Okay. Let me just close that and create a new solution. Grab a drink. Different containers down here that we'll eventually look at. Flow layout panel handles layout of its component, arranges them in a flow layout automatically. Split container, 2 resizable panels, which you can add controls. Got 2 panels. Though I don't think it's restricted just to 2 panels on this. Though if I can remember where the count is, that'll be the key part. I don't think I'm going to remember where that's at. Not that I'm grabbing the right piece here, because I'm just grabbing one panel. I see that because it says panel 2 up here. And here's my split container. And that should be everything. And I'm not seeing that. Once we get to that point, I'll look it up by then. I never create panels like this. Usually I just freeform put these panels on and resize them and so forth. But I'm sure that there is a way to have more than 2. Well, if I can choose that. That should be selected. Huh. Well, let me do undo. There we go. Tab control. So you got different tab pages here. If you right click up here in the gray area, then you can add a tab. You can add more tab. This performs the same functionality as you see in Excel, where you have multiple tabs. What does that do? Well, if I have a monthly calendar here, and I have a list box here. What I'm doing is I'm clicking these individual tabs to switch to them. Like that. So then when I run them, see, there's my calendar, there's a list box, I think it was, and there's my button. So it creates logical groupings again. Now, for the most part, you probably don't give these names. And you always have to be careful on what you got currently selected. See how this says tab control 1. That's the entire item. Now, if I click within here, it now says tab page 4. And I can change the text of it to say maybe sales. I click tab page 3 up here twice, and then I click down in here to select this inner. And call that purchasing. Again, click tab page 2 twice, click inside of here. Calendar, and so forth. Although you can program these, a lot of times you don't really do anything with them. This just allows you to have like different screens contained in a tab format. That way, if you have a lot of different components you've added on here, then this allows you to work with multiple ones. And you see this in let me get see if I'm still signed in to this site. I created some I'm not logged in. Let me log in, and then I'll talk about what I'm seeing. I created some events this morning in a product called Sign Up Genius. And it's an event planner. And within each one, if I go and look, it's got a tabbed format across the top. First one says general details. Second one says theme. Third one says dates and times. Fourth one is slots. Fifth one settings. Sixth one is view live. And 7 is invite. Now, the way it's set up is when you create a brand new event, I'm over here in my first tab. I'm on general details. It will not let me go to these other tabs until I finish this first tab. So they have programmatically disabled that. Then, after I do general details and I click the update button, there's an update button down here. Then it automatically takes me over to my second tab. And I can enter information in. I can also go back to my first tab now. And so each tab as you goes through opens other tabs. This would be something from a design standpoint, be fairly easy to. Well, I shouldn't say that. Some of these screens have a lot of a lot of items on them, but the tab portion would be easy to create. Now I use this for another purpose at IFR. I had tabs for each separate application of our manufacturing system. So I had a shipping tab, I had a sales order tab. Can't even remember all the different tabs I had now. And we controlled through a database which tabs they could see. So we gave them rights. If they weren't in shipping, maybe we didn't want them to have the shipping tab. So we would basically disable that tab. Let's see. This has probably about all exciting stuff on tabs. Table layout panel. I don't think I've ever used that. So you can add column, add row. Delete that. Menus and toolbars. We'll be looking at all that. If I click menu strip, notice up here it says type here. File, type here, open, save, close, print. Basically creates a menu structure up here. Kind of the old school menu structure you see right here by default. So if I run that, then I can click the file and it does this pop down, and then I can choose whatever. Now each one you're going to put code behind. So if I was programming this, I'd have to code each event. What am I going to do when I do an open? What am I going to do when I do a save? What am I going to do when I do a close? What am I going to do when I do a print? See if there's anything else really interesting. All of it's interesting, but data is like when you're binding it to a database. Like I say, some of these I've never used. Background worker, I've never used. Serial port. Some of these are more geared if you're writing a system utility. System library of some sort. Print dialog. The dialogues in general are such that you'll call them to perform some action. For example, when I do a print, I want to bring up the print dialog. If they were to do a printer setup, then there'd be something here I'd want to set up for the printer. Here's an open and save. Well, if I were to program the open and save on this, I'd want to call those dialogues. Now what they do is when you do that, when you do a file open or close, where's open? Open, file, and it pops up with this. In Windows, you're not sitting here programming all this. So this is already designed for you. All you're doing is interfacing with it. So when we call the open file dialog, you're not sitting there writing all the code for this. All you're doing is potentially filling in this file name to begin with, or retrieving that file name and handling this appropriate when you got open and cancel. But all this functionality is built in with Windows. Nothing there, nothing there. I don't think there's anything under time and date. Deprecated and shouldn't use. Text fields, I don't think there's anything. Form widgets, layouts. Some of these don't apply to Windows program. I don't think anything here does. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't think that'd have anything. And again, just generally, if you scroll to the top, you see there's all Windows forms. This is where it puts everything together. So if you can't remember which grouping it should be in, this is where you find it. Okay, now the assignment I'm going to put out there is I want you to create a basically a order entry screen. You can do it for like a software product, a game. So if somebody's ordering Call of Duty, seemed like last time I bought yeah, I think it's Call of Duty. I had some options. Shipping, you know, that'd be part of that. I need to put in there too. Need to put in your address. Now, don't do anything with the data. So they're going to have them inputted in blanks, and then it's not going to actually go anywhere. But we're going to build order entry screen and try to make it such that it's handles you know, you shouldn't be able to click the calculate if you haven't put an amount in, for example. And it should calculate your final total at the bottom. So it should have code behind it, but not much. You're not like stored in a database is what I mean. So you're just calculating the total amount. Is there any questions on that? Well, I'll go ahead and stop the recording, and we'll go ahead and stop there.